Hello and welcome back to the Tik-A Tee Method. My name is Ron Castonguay. For today's video for week 28, I'm going to be introducing more, less common compound time signatures. We know that when there's a 6, a 9, or a 12, all numbers divisible by 3, on the top of our time signature, more often than not, we're going to be in a compound time signature. But the compound time signatures that I've introduced so far, 6-8, 9-8, and 12-8, all have 8s on the bottom number. Well, what if we had a 2 on the bottom, a 4 on the bottom, or even a 16 on the bottom? One of the goals for today's video is to talk about what the bottom number of a compound time signature means versus the bottom number of a simple time signature. They don't necessarily mean the same thing, and we're going to talk about that in today's video. We're going to do some exercises together. I hope you'll stick around for the whole video because we're going to get started right now. Okay, here we are on the first page of week 28, and let's dive in by again recapping how we know when we're in a compound time signature. If the top number of your time signature is a 6, a 9, or a 12, all numbers divisible by 3, more often than not, you're in a compound time signature. But now, let's talk about that bottom number. Let's look at the third sentence in this paragraph inside the box, because this explains it really well. For compound time signatures, the bottom number of the time signature actually represents the subdivision of the beat or the pulse, not the note getting the beat as it does in simple time signatures. If you multiply the note that is represented by the bottom number by 3, this will give you the beat note, which is always a dotted note in compound time signatures. So that may be confusing. Let's break it down. Let me explain. Let's first look at some compound time signatures that we're familiar with. Let's look at 6-8, 9-8, and 12-8. Each one of these has an 8 on the bottom. But the question is the 8, which represents an 8th note, the beat note, the pulse in these time signatures? No, it is not. So what I'm saying here is take the note that is represented by that 8, which is an 8th note, and multiply it times 3, and this will give you the beat note or the pulse. We know that an 8th note times 3 equals a dotted quarter note because a dotted quarter note can be broken down into 3 equal 8th notes. And in 6-8, 9-8, and 12-8, isn't the dotted quarter note the beat note or the pulse? Yes, it absolutely is. So when I say multiply the bottom number or the note that's represented by the bottom number by 3, this is exactly what I mean. So how does this differ from a simple time signature? Well, let's look at common time, or 4/4. We know that 4/4 means 4 beats in the measure and the quarter note gets the beat. Well, this bottom number right here represents a quarter note, and we know that there are 4 of them in each common time measure. 4 beats in the measure and the quarter note gets the beat. So the bottom number in a simple time signature actually represents the beat note or the pulse. Whereas in a compound time signature, the bottom number represents the subdivision of each beat. And that's the difference between the bottom number of a simple time signature and the bottom number of a compound time signature. I hope that helps. And while we're talking about time signatures with 4 on the bottom, let's talk about 6-4. Let's talk about this example right here. In 6-4, the top number is divisible by 3, and therefore we must assume it is a compound time signature. The bottom number is a 4, which we just talked about represents a quarter note. The quarter note is the subdivision of the beat in this case. If you multiply a quarter note times 3, that equals a dotted half note, a note that normally gets 3 beats or 3 quarter notes. The dotted half note in this case in 6-4 is the beat note. 6-4 is a compound duple time signature, which means there are 2 beats in the measure and the dotted half note gets the beat, and that dotted half note can be broken down into 3 equal quarter notes. Let's do the math one more time. We're in 6-4, we know the bottom number's a 4, which represents a quarter note. We multiply that quarter note times 3, and we get a dotted half note, because we know there are 3 quarter notes in every dotted half note. And that dotted half note is getting the beat or the pulse. In this compound duple time signature, 6/4, there are 2 dotted half notes per measure. Each one of those dotted half notes is broken down into 3 quarter notes. Each one of those quarter notes can be broken down further into eighth notes. So there are going to be 6 eighth notes for every single beat in this time signature. 6 eighth notes is equivalent to 3 quarter notes is equivalent to 1 single dotted half note. So that's the breakdown. And the Tik-A Tee verbiage is very straightforward, very logical. Ta for the dotted half note, ta for the quarter note, and T for the eighth note. So if 6/4 is compound duple, let's look at these 3 time signatures right here that I just boxed. 6/4, 9/4, and 12/4. 6/4 is compound duple. Logically, 9/4 is compound triple. Therefore, 12/4 is compound quadruple. Hopefully you're noticing a pattern here. 6 on the top is duple, 9 on the top is triple, and 12 on the top is quadruple. 6/4 represents 2 dotted half notes per measure, 9/4 represents 3 dotted half notes per measure, and 12/4 represents, of course, 4 dotted half notes per measure. So there's 2 beats, 3 beats, and 4 beats, respectively. So, does this apply to these 3 time signatures and these 3 time signatures? Absolutely it does. They'll be duple, then triple, then quadruple. So what's the difference? In the second 3 time signatures, there's a 2 on the bottom. Whenever there's a 2 on the bottom of a time signature, that represents a half note. But in these 3 time signatures, does that half note represent the beat note? No, it does not, because we're in a compound time signature situation here. So the half note represents the subdivision. We must multiply a half note times 3 to find our beat note. 1 half note times 3 equals a dotted whole note. A dotted whole note, therefore, can be broken down into 3 equal half notes. So in 6/2, for example, there are 2 beats in the measure, the dotted whole note gets the beat, and each one of those beats can be broken down into 3 equal half notes. Let's move to the last 3 time signatures. There's a 16 on the bottom. Whenever there's a 16 on the bottom of a time signature, that represents a 16th note. But again, is that 16th note the beat note in these time signatures? No, it is not. It is the subdivision. We must multiply a 16th note times 3 to get our beat note. 1/16th note times 3 equals a dotted eighth note. So in 9/16, for example, there will be 3 beats in the measure. The dotted eighth note will get the beat, and each one of those dotted eighth notes can be equally broken down into 3 16th notes. Some really cool stuff here. For today's video, I'm only going to be doing 2 exercises, one in 6/4 and one in 9/4. If you want to learn more about compound time signatures with a 2 on the bottom and compound time signatures with a 16 on the bottom, you need to go out and get my book. There's more explanations about those time signatures in my book, as well as how the Tik-A Tee method verbiage translates to those time signatures. And there's a ton of practice exercises. So do yourself a favor, go out and get the book and learn all about these time signatures. Okay, without further ado, let's go find our first practice exercise in 6/4. All right, here we are at our first exercise, exercise 28B. And as I said, we're in 6/4. 6/4 is a compound duple time signature. There's 2 beats in the measure. The dotted half note gets the beat, and each one of those dotted half notes can be divided into 3 quarter notes. All right, let's get to the analysis. On measure 1, beat 1, we've got a dotted half note, the beat note. Then our invisible bar line will go right here. This is a symmetrical time signature, meaning that we can divide this measure equally in half. The second beat will be these 3 quarter notes right here. That's the subdivision of the beat. Measure 2, we've got a half note here, but that's not the full beat. The full beat includes those 2/8 notes right there. And the Tik-A Tee verbiage translates very nicely. A quarter note longer is ta, eighth notes are ti, nothing changes. Our invisible bar line is going to go right there, squeeze right in here. Then beat 2 will be those 4/8 notes plus that quarter note. That's going to be beat 2. So some really fun rhythms already in this exercise. Measure 3, we have what I would call a lilting rhythm. This is the equivalent to the dotted 8th note, 16th note, 8th note rhythm in 6/8. It's going to sound almost identical to that. Maybe it even will sound identical to that because we have 2 beats in the measure here as well, right? So this dotted quarter note to 8th note to quarter note is the same type of lilting rhythm, and that takes up all of beat 1. Then we have an invisible bar line, and we do that nice lilting rhythm again here on beat 2. Last measure, 3 quarter notes, the subdivision of our beat, invisible bar line, and then on beat 2 we've got this dotted half note, which gets the beat. As we're holding that note, we should be looking ahead to the first measure on that second line. And in measure 5, on beat 1, we've got a dotted half note. The invisible bar line will go underneath this tie, and I'm going to parenthesize beat 2 here because we're not going to re-articulate that quarter note. Then we will say the remaining 2 quarter notes for beat 2 there in that 5th measure. Going to measure 6, we have ta, ta, ta. Again, the subdivision of the beat. The invisible bar line will go under this tie. We have another tie connecting us again to beat 2 that I will parenthesize because we will not re-articulate that quarter note. And then we'll say ti, ti, ta to finish off beat 2 of measure 6. Measure 7, we have a quarter note plus 4/8 notes. That equals 3 quarter notes. That equals a dotted half note. That takes up all of beat 1. My invisible bar line will squeeze right in here. Beat 2 of measure 7 is a half note plus those 2/8 notes. That's beat 2. Remember, every single one of our beats in 6/4 is equivalent to a dotted half note or 3 quarter notes. In the final measure, we have 4/8 notes going to a quarter note. That's beat 1. Invisible bar line. Beat 2 will be this dotted half note. I would write -1 here to make sure that I hold that dotted half note out full value. All right, there's going to be some really fun rhythms in this exercise. We need to go get a metronome started, find a pitch, and vocalize this exercise. I hope you'll join me. Let's go. Okay, I know we just analyzed this exercise, we put in all the beats and the invisible bar lines and some cool stuff, but I am going to remove the ink from the exercise so we can see it just a little more clearly. That being said, I am going to help us out in the performance of this exercise by including the subdivisions of the beats in our metronome so we can really feel that compound time signature groove or feel a little bit better. I'm using the metronome from drummers-pulse.com this week again. Thank you to the folks at that website for offering up a free online metronome that includes subdivisions. We're going to be at 56 beats per minute. Now, what does that mean in 6/4? That means that the dotted half note equals 56. And for each one of those beats, each one of those pulses, each one of those dotted half notes, those will be subdivided into 3 equal quarter notes. And I'll show you what this sounds like on the metronome in a moment. I'm going to be singing this exercise on a G3. You're welcome to join me on that note, an octave lower, an octave higher, or a different note altogether. But the idea is that you vocalize this exercise with me. Okay, let's get started. Okay, let's get our metronome started. You can hear those dotted half notes are being emphasized in the metronome, but I'm also giving us the subdivision of those 3 quarter notes, and we're going to keep that going for the performance. All right, here's my G3. This is what I'll be singing the exercise on, and I'm going to give us a 2-measure count off, then we are off to the races. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, and ta, 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 ti, 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 ta, ta, ti, ta, ta, ti, ta, 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 ti, ti, ta, ta, ti, 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 ta, ti, 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 ta, ta. All right, let's stop that metronome. Man, that goes by super fast. It's super fun. There are no rests in this exercise, however, so I had to sneak in some strategic breaths. Hopefully, I maintain the integrity of the rhythms. The question is, did we get the rhythms correct or did we make any mistakes? We need to go to my website now to find the MP3 answer for exercise 28B to find out. Let's go do that. Here we go. All right, here we are at my website where you can find all 363 of the MP3s that accompany my book. We are all queued up for exercise 28B, but first, let's review your options. After you've analyzed an exercise, after you've performed it and sight-read it with a metronome and on a pitch, and you come to my website, you find the MP3 answer, you do have three options here. Option number one, just listen to the MP3 and check for your accuracy that way. Option number two is to vocalize again along with the MP3. And the final option, option number three, is to break out your instrument and perform along with the MP3. Okay, so make your decision, option 1, 2, or 3, because I'm pressing play on exercise 28B right now. One, two, ready, and ta 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 ti 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 ta ta ti ta ta ti ta 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 ti ti ta ta ti 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 ta ti 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 ta ta. Cool. Exercise 28B, man, that's a fun one. And again, there's no rest in there, so you just got to kind of sneak in a breath to maintain the integrity of those rhythms. Okay, if you did not yet choose option 3, if you have not yet performed exercise 28B on your instrument, you need to do that before moving on to the next exercise. One, two, ready, and. All right, let's move on to the next exercise, exercise 28D. This one's in 9/4. This is a compound triple time signature. There are 3 beats in the measure, and the dotted half note, once again, will get the beat, and it is equally divided into 3 quarter notes. Okay, so the difference between 6/4 and 9/4, 6/4 is duple, 2 beats in the measure, 9/4 is triple, 3 beats in the measure. Okay, let's get to the analysis. In the first measure, we've got the beat notes, 3 dotted half notes. Those are going to each take up a beat. Beat 1, beat 2, and beat 3. And you can probably guess what's going to happen in that second measure. We have the subdivision of those dotted half notes. So for every 3 quarter notes, it's going to be a beat. So here's beat 1, here's beat 2, and here's beat 3. 1, 2, and 3. And in the third measure, all 3 beats are taken up by this dotted whole note tied over to a dotted half note, which takes up the entire measure. Okay, so a dotted half note plus a dotted half note plus a dotted half note. That's going to take up that full measure there. Then in measure 4, we've got 3 quarter notes taking up beat 1 right here. Then beat 2 is this dotted half note. And then beat 3 is this dotted half rest, giving us time and opportunity to look ahead at that first measure on the second line. And in measure 5, on beat 1, we've got that really cool lilting rhythm, that dotted quarter to the 8th note to the quarter that's similar to that dotted 8th note to the 16th note to the 8th note that we went over in 6/8. Okay, so that's beat 1. Beat 2 is these 3 quarter notes right here, followed by a dotted half note on beat 3. All right, moving on to measure 6, we've got a quarter rest plus 2 quarter notes. That's beat 1. The lilting rhythm here on beat 2. Then we've got 4 8th notes going to a quarter note on beat 3. Hopefully you're starting to see how each of these dotted half notes is being broken down. In measure 7, 2 quarter notes going to 2 eighth notes. That's the first beat. The second beat is that dotted half note. We've got a dotted half rest on beat 3. So going into measure 8, another dotted half rest on beat 1, and then beats 2 and 3 will be these 2 tied dotted half notes. And I would write -1 here to make sure that we hold that full value. Okay, again, some really cool rhythms here, and it's going to go by super fast. It's going to be super fun. Let's get a metronome started. Let's find our pitch. Let's perform it. Okay, so unlike the last exercise, I'm actually going to leave the ink on the page for this one so you can really see where all 3 of those beats fall. I'm going to stay at 56 beats per minute, or as we know, the dotted half note equals 56, and I'm going to sing this once again on a G3. Let's get started. All right, I'm going to get the metronome started. You've noticed that I've changed it from 2 beats per measure to 3 beats per measure on the metronome because we're in a compound triple time signature. And I'm going to keep those subdivisions in there. All right, here's my G3. This is what I'll be singing the exercise on. And I'm only going to give us a 1 measure count off for this one, so be ready. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, ta 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 ta. Ta ti ta 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 ti ta ti 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 ta 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 ti ti ta ta. All right, let's stop that metronome. Man, that one's fun too. There are a few more rests in this one, so you could find some places to breathe, which is nice. It is fast though, it goes by super fast. We need to know, did we make any mistakes? Did we get it all right? Let's go to my website now, find the MP3 for 28D together, and listen to it. Let's go. All right, here we are back at my website. We are all queued up for exercise 28D. And now that you know what your 3 options are when you come to my website and find the MP3, make your decision because without further ado, I am pressing play on exercise 28D. One, 2, 3, 1. Ready, and ta 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 ti ta 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 ti ta ti 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 ta 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 ti ti ta ta. All right, there it is. Super fun, super fast, 28D. And you know the drill. If you haven't yet chosen option 3, which is playing exercise 28D on your instrument, you need to do that first before moving on. One, 2, 3, 1. Ready, and And that does it for week 28. I hope you learned a little bit more about compound time signatures, especially what the bottom number of a compound time signature means versus what the bottom number of a simple time signature means. A pretty significant and important difference there. And I hope you're really starting to recognize now when you see a 6, a 9, or a 12 on the top number of a time signature, you are more than likely in a compound time signature. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I do hope that you'll go out and you'll grab my book so you can do all of the practice exercises for week 28, including the ones that have time signatures with a 2 on the bottom and a 16 on the bottom. Until then, and in the meantime, I hope you'll help out the channel. Please hit that like and subscribe button and that notification bell so you get the latest video. And if you're inspired to do so, leave a comment or a question. I will reply to any and all comments. Thank you again for allowing me to be a part of your rhythmic journey. I will see you in week 29.